Oh boy, did the internet end up getting interested about this one. And in some cases, actually quite genuinely, as many Diablo players flocked to Season 1 actually wanting to play the game. However, a few other interesting things happened. Before the season dropped, the pre-season patch absolutely set the internet on fire. There were a lot of nerfs. Didn't feel good. The developers admitted it didn't feel good, and they essentially did a big ol' live stream, kind of apologizing for the situation. However, also, the battle passes came under scrutiny for not being particularly generous, as a certain player has bumped into absolutely what I would say is an instance of a dark pattern appearing. The sort of thing that could end up having a player accidentally spending a non-refundable resource. This is an example of something that we've also seen in other Blizzard games, because absolutely there is a part of Overwatch 2's design that I think is a dark pattern that I absolutely want to talk about with you later on today. Alright then, let's get stuck in. Number one, interest in the Season of the Malignant, where, yeah, actually, quite a lot of people did appear to turn up for this. The D4 servers actually had some queue times, especially in Europe. Of course, this is an example of people all logging in, but more importantly, all logging in at the season start time, which of course will cause peak load. So sustained high capacity and ability to deal with peak load, they are different things from a server architecture perspective. And this shouldn't be too surprising. They did say that over 10 million people experienced Diablo 4 in June, so perhaps they didn't stand up enough servers or whatever it is to be able to do with this. But essentially, there you go. What about the critical situation then? How is this actually being received? I'll hold back on my personal opinion. I'll first talk about a few examples here. So Tyler from PC Gamer. The first season is what the normal game should have felt like. It frankly sucks that to even play with Malignant Hearts, you should have to complete the campaign first. Diablo shouldn't be about eating your vegetables. God, I thought that was a really powerful line. And there are so many times in video games where don't you just kind of feel like the game's saying, hey, eat your vegetables. You paid for the whole thing, but eat your vegetables. Yeah, I can kind of understand that. And I think this is just because the Malignant Hearts, they do in many cases end up feeling a fun little bump of power. Therefore, it's all just that natural thing of good things come to those who wait. Would you rather level a character up through the D4 open world with this kind of new restructured form of Diablo? Would you rather do that with bells and whistles or without bells and whistles? Many people will obviously think I'd rather do that with. Then we've also got Rage Gaming Videos, who did say, wait a second, this is actually fun, before he went on to die. Because, yes, this is the infamous video, or famous video, I should say, where he's talking about Season 1 and the whole being a positive experience, and that after patch 1.1 hits, he thinks he will enjoy it quite a bit more than the base game of D4. The season hasn't surpassed expectations in any crazy way, but it also hasn't under-delivered on anything other than the timeline of the patches, really. And, yeah, then he went to die in his hardcore character. Rip King. As for some caveats, though, and I guess a bit of my own opinion, I would certainly say, like, as an example here, you know, he is a ARPG gamer, right? You go to, say, Quinn. Quinn's an RPG gamer, or ARPG gamer, right? Somebody like me, I may be more in that broader audience. So when I look at the Season of Malignant, I do think, yeah, it kind of would have just been more fun to play with that fun thing being activated. I then sort of think, experientially, what does this give me? It gives me some new build opportunities, and it gives me a other source of power that I can chase while I am leveling up. For me, however, I mean, I don't think that the Malignant Tunnels are particularly the big exciting piece of content that I would want to do. They do seem like more of just a way to, to get the Malignant Hearts that you want. So from my perspective, I'm just thinking like, what's a bit more big? What's a bit more transformative? And that's why Season 1 to me isn't that interesting. However, future seasons may be. Certainly when I compare to the likes of, say, I think it's the Crucible season that's the current one in Path of Exile, it looks quite impressive, right? You know, you've got all of these different passives that you're these different effects you're able to go through on your weapons, right? But then there's even a thing where you're basically like using a forge to like kind of merge your weapons together, and it's got all this crazy shit. There's a kind of like a little challenge dungeon thingy with with the forge at the end. It all looks quite good and quite a bit more involved than what we're dealing with here. However, Blizzard themselves even did temper expectations on this season. What I would expect, though, is for criticism to increase as time goes on. I mean, we saw that with D4 anyway, but for a lot of people, look, it's an action RPG. The bit where you are quickly going up the power curve, that's all feeling good. Gaining levels, building out, a new build, that all feels good. The bit, though, that could be a little bit more of a problem is when we get to World Tier 4, right? So somebody's maybe surpassed level 70, they've done that capstone dungeon, and now what is the game for them? Higher Nightmare Mode dungeons? And I think for plenty of folks, just doing Nightmare Dungeon, Nightmare Dungeon, Nightmare Dungeon isn't particularly exciting. And even right now, if you want to be leveling up, I think it's like between level 1 and 20 and then roughly like 20 and 45 or something, there are just efficient dungeons to chain run. And the reason why you chain run those is because of just the XP distribution in the game. And it's one of those weird things where, has the community optimized the fun out of that? You could say so in a way. Is it also just a case of that's how the game is incentivizing you to play? Should perhaps the Whispering Hearts be a little bit more, or the Whispering Tree stuff? Should that be more powerful? There's definitely, a discussion to be had there. I think for a lot of people, they found that D4, like a lot of things were great, but perhaps what they were looking for maybe more is like more of an end game structure with more things to do. And this is a season that isn't particularly, I think, ticking that box for people. I think there are also some existing concerns over, say, the chase items, which are obviously not exactly being addressed here. Now, we should say that Blizzard themselves here did say that this season would be comparatively low-key, right? If we are to compare to what comes next. So absolutely, my expectations for Season 2 are higher. I do expect more. I do expect better. I suppose what this is, though, is a stabilization of the core game, and for that, it seems that even though it's not for me, it is basically fine to good. It may be not great, maybe not terrific, but good. For a lot of people, that won't be enough, but hopefully, Season 2 will be. Now, let's talk about dark patterns. So, if you're not sure what a dark pattern is, it's basically just those UI and sort of user experience things that are almost designed to trick you, right? It's the way if you're trying to cancel a service, right? Cancel your subscription. You'll always find that the cancel button is very much, not being highlighted to you, right? You know those times where it's like gray on white, but the don't cancel button is like big and bright and blue. All of that stuff. An example here of a dark pattern is happening with activating your premium pass. This was pointed out by Rurikan. And it's certainly set the internet ablaze. Even at the time of this screenshot, you're dealing with 16.2k likes. Now, the way that this works is that if you pre-purchased or got the deluxe editions, you get a token, and that token will give you the premium season pass as a part of your purchase. This token does not have to be used for the first season of the game. You can just use it for the second season if you don't want to, because remember, these tokens don't give you access to the season, they merely give you the premium battle pass for that season. The idea here is that if you're not jazzed by the rewards in a current battle pass, that value can go into a battle pass that you do care about. Something I think is an interesting design problem. Not as much as the design problem that Overwatch 2 has. It's like, I like the character of Tracer. I would like to earn that mythic skin, but good God, it's a lot of work to do that. I now feel I'm in this situation with Overwatch 2 where the game's saying, hey, you got 15 days to earn that skin. I'm like, well, I don't think I have enough time to play your game. I'd love to work towards that skin. And the game's like, fuck you, we're deleting it in 15 days. What does that make me feel? That makes me feel apathetic, like I'd rather do something else. So that's an inherent problem. But the particular dark pattern here is really several things coming together to create a problem. Whenever you open your seasonal journey while using a controller, the cursor highlight immediately selects the Activate Premium Pass button, which will expand the token. And there is no confirmation, do you wish to use this? That isn't there. You click the button, your token's gone. This is an example of a dark pattern. It is a user experience-based sort of technique that encourages people to spend money by making spending money the default option, even if it does include the accidental spending of money, and that just unequivocally is the case here. Doesn't seem to have impacted everybody. It's mostly people who've pre-ordered and, got the token, or perhaps are using the controller. And the way that this kind of could be is what happens? whenever a UI element appears, where does the cursor thing default to in a controller-based game? It defaults to a button. If that button happens to be a purchase button that has no confirmation, now we suddenly have quite a large problem. In the same way that if there was a confirmation, but your cursor defaulted to purchase, and then in the confirmation window, your cursor defaulted to yes, that would still be an example of a dark pattern, because somebody could quite easily button mash and make a whoopsie there. And if this is going to happen when you are just checking your seasonal journey UI, then it's not like this is, cloistered away under the store banner. So that's a real problem. They are working on a fix, though, to make that no longer be the case, which does draw into question, how much of this is intentional versus just it's the targeting behavior of the virtual cursor. Honestly, I think it's the latter, but I think that it is in itself scandalous that nobody picked up on this as a problem. So no matter what, it is a problem. Now, there is one other dark pattern I want to talk about in relationship to Blizzard, and it is actually in Overwatch 2. And it's just the way that in Overwatch 2, because you think, right, what am I going to do? I'm going to spend some of my money in a skin. If that's what you want to do, where are you going to go? You're going to go to the store. You're going to see all the skins be presented. And you'll notice that most of them are in bundles. Like the one that everyone's talking about right now is the Lifeguard Mercy bundle, because hey, it's a lifeguard getup for Mercy. Everyone's going to buy that shit. We all know how it works. Little do many people know, you can get it for like 1,800 Overwatch coins or credits whenever you go in the hero gallery. The store never tells you this, and the store doesn't offer you a clear and obvious way to buy just the skin itself. Instead, it makes you think like the only way to buy the skin is a part of a 2,600 credit bundle. That is a fantastic example of one of those beautiful, lovely, dark patterns that feels a bit evil and mean. Another great one as an example was Destiny 2. Because you see in Destiny 2, I forget, it's like $10 you can spend, and that gives you 1,000 silver plus 100 free. Whenever they increased the cost of their season pass, or the battle pass, whatever, it went from 1,000 to 1,200, which notably is more than what is given to you in that same, $10 or whatever it was bundle. Another example of a bit of a dark pattern going on. Now, there are also some quirks with the battle pass. I think it's very cute, Blizzard, that the battle pass gives 666 platinum. I understand. I know what you're... 666. I know, it's just as smart as Elon saying 42069 every time that he can. Here's the problem, though. People rapidly realize that with 666 platinum, you can't buy anything in the store. Which basically means it's like, yeah, you earn all this platinum so that you can then buy something. Doesn't feel great. So it's less than the number of platinum needed to purchase Battle Pass, and it's less than anything to get in the store. That feels pretty bad. Hey, it's just like that in Overwatch 2. It's not even one of those games where your Battle Pass can earn you another Battle Pass. It's almost as if, if your game feels moderately generous and people feel good about buying things, they'll maybe buy more things. It's not like the most successful free-to-play sort of thing in the world. The gacha game is generally like that. They throw buckets of stuff at you, and then that creates the big spenders. Of course, I'm not saying gacha is a good thing. It's just bloody hell. The people who are doing the evil thing have even realized that looking like you're being generous is a good thing. So Blizzard looking like they're being skimpy and they're nickel and diming, that's just stupid. It's just bad business, my dudes. Even here, some users actually not really knowing how much favor, which is basically Battle Pass XP, which then led to Blizzard having to do an official image explainer of how favor is actually earned. So there you go. But even with that, specific tracking of favor is unavailable, which is a massive oversight in a leveling-driven game. And I suppose to somewhat deal with all of these problems, in addition to the big wave of nerfs, we had the famous campfire chat. The one which I've got to hand it to you, PC Gamer Media team. How it started, how it's going. I mean, yeah, you just picked a really good frame of all the boys looking kind of sad, which you can understand because as humans, they're in a bit of a tricky position, aren't they? Having to deal with all of this. So it's clear as that this stream was thrown together quite fast. It wasn't planned until just a few days before, which probably limited, their prep time, what they're able to talk about, etc. This was clearly a firefighting situation, which is fair. Now, the first thing then, the ongoing live service mission statements that they want to adhere to going forward are these, right? Keep the game fun for players. Good. Huh. No problem, then. It'll be great. Have a wide variety of builds to discover, put together, and optimize across all 5 classes. Introduce new items and powers every season to keep the game fresh and increase build variety. I suppose there's a thing that I'm thinking about there, though. What about the expression of build variety? I'm thinking people want more than just the Nightmare Dungeons. Just a thought. What do you think, anyhow? To continue to evolve endgame with high monster density for powerful builds, to mow down and activities to challenge your build. When making changes to increase build diversity, they will let some be overpowered until they have provided compelling alternatives, to introduce meta changes at predictable times like season start, and to react quickly to problems that arise. Now, this all immediately was memed on, especially the first parts, which of course is, obvious considering how people had a lot of builds be kind of messed around by this patch. But they did discuss their intent in the patch and season. They don't want D4 to be an endless grind. They frame it as a capped power experience, with the capped part there being particularly relevant. That's why they needed those nerfs, they say. Even though the way that players, build power is key to enjoying a game, they still felt that the nerfs were needed. They said that their goal is for multiple builds to be powerful enough to defeat the toughest foes like Uber Lilith. One build shouldn't be the only way to play a class. Some changes are implemented in this to address that problem. Then they also talked about Nightmare Dungeons, right? Saying that from their perspective, the plan was to have those be completable without a meta build, but they currently aren't, with this getting even worse when you scale beyond tier 50. Of course, it's those things, any differences in balance are, those gaps, they get bigger and bigger and bigger as you scale. You scale up and up and up and up and up. It's why, say, Mythic Plus rapidly gets hard in World of Warcraft. It's the same thing's going to happen here. So if you feel like the only way to get past this insane exponential scaling is an insanely broken build, then, it's going to cause a little bit of an issue for the developers, but then also an issue for the fun of the game, because inherently one of the points of an action RPG is to be completely busted, because that is fun. But basically they say that every time they nerf something, they will be buffing an alternative option, and they also say they'll do a better job at communicating. Specifically, patch notes will be out a week before implementation, so there can be a conversation with the community. But in that vein then, they talked about what's next. Let's do that. So 1.11, it is what our boy up here talked about, that he's looking forward to. Right, it's what the developer said is coming next, so I think we should have a chat about 1.1.1. Here's the deal. Nightmare Dungeons are going to be rebalanced, some builds will be changed, and more engaging endgame experiences will be worked on. In particular, the endgame will be getting better monster density for powerful builds to be challenged by. And in specifics, here's the following, right? So, today we release a hotfix that introduces changes to Nightmare Dungeons. These are changes that map to some of the balance changes made in 1.1.0. Most notably, Barbarians and Sorcerers, Sorc First, will be getting adjustments to their legendary aspects in 1.11. Monster density will be substantially higher in Nightmare Dungeons, as well as Helltides. That's definitely good. More in Helltides, very good. They'll be adding an additional stash tab, as well as elixir stack size increases. They're reducing gold respec cost by 40%. For me, that's a really big one. D3, I understand a lot of the criticisms that people had about D3 at the start with the way that its skill system worked, but certainly an upside of its skill system is that, assuming you just didn't have a set that you needed, you could very quickly just chop and change around your stuff. Whereas now in D4, it's like, in fairness, it's fucking laborious to respec your character. And for some people, that idea of, you can't completely change your character all the time, that is a core part of choices mattering. So really then, it's about how much do we want choices to matter versus providing that kind of ability for people to fully experience spec diversity and build diversity by being able to rapidly change themselves up a lot of the time. So to that then, they've done a 40% gold respec cost. Maybe for some people though, it's just that the UI is kind of annoying to do that in. That's another side of things. Anyway, they also want the leveling journey from 50 to 100 to be faster and are looking at increasing XP bonuses for playing in higher world tiers. Oh, thank God. Because, yeah, here's the deal. In D4, a lot of your power does come from your level because within each level, you get 4 Paragon board points, and going through your Paragon boards is quite important to your character's level of power. And to be honest, for me, just the whole, like, slowly, mindlessly grind, to me, that's kind of boring. It did feel like the pacing was just too slow and not engaging enough for me. And I mean, look, if you're the kind of person and the way that you're enjoying the game was with 4 other people, turbo grinding in the most optimal dungeon, and like, hey, more power to you if that's fun. For a lot of people, though, they maybe don't want to play in that super sweat way, right? They maybe just want to chill, play Diablo, level up, right? Because, you know, sometimes these games can be enjoyed. It's just a mindless kill fest, which is fun. That is how I would probably enjoy this, and it definitely felt way too slow for me. And where I lost a lot of my motivation is when I started trying to level faster, because the game didn't by default feel like it was rewarding enough in terms of its leveling curve, and I therefore felt like I was being pushed into, achieving my goals via means that weren't fun. That's just an issue you run into with games like this. For many people, though, this won't be an issue. Also, the stash tab fix is one that people simply don't understand. This led to the game director being a bit more explicit, saying it's a performance issue because, this is insane, when you see another player in the game, you load them and their entire stash filled with all of their items. And I've seen a lot of people who work in, like, enterprise database stuff who are just looking at this and saying, why did you architect it like that? That seems like an obvious problem. Yeah, so basically, yeah, it's a performance concern, not a player storage concern. That's kind of sucky. And to draw all of this in a loop, right, I'm going to go to our channel and, perhaps we can have a bit of visual storytelling be on the go here, right? So here I am on the Bellular News channel. Of course, go hear yourself, hit that sub button. So whenever I was about to publish this, which was the big video whenever the season was about to drop and all the player sentiment was coming, I was like, what do I put in this thumbnail? And I went over to Twitter, and I do follow Quinn on Twitter, so I just saw Quinn, D4 bad. And I was like, oh, this is free. This is free. That could be in my thumbnail. Quinn said D4 bad. Fantastic. People wonder, why did Quinn say D4 bad? What's really going on here? And that's what the video is supposed to explain. Now what do we have? Oh, look, Quinn has found more words. He said, gotta give credit where it's due. Cool to see the Diablo team owning the awful patch, committing to making things better and not making the same mistake in the future. I think that is a fair statement, and one of the things that did impress me in D4 is, like, a lot of those issues that I was feeling as a player, a lot of other people were feeling. Do you know what happened? People said, hey, this feels too slow. Why are we turbo grinding normal dungeons instead of doing nightmare dungeons and trying to challenge ourselves in terms of game difficulty? It doesn't give enough XP. Very quickly, what did Blizzard do? They implemented the dungeon teleports, like, with unlocked by your sigil that allows for way faster travel time when you're just doing a bunch of nightmare dungeons. They increase the amount of XP that you get from nightmare dungeons and stuff like that. This is, in fairness, a Blizzard that is more willing to respond, right? Old Blizzard was behind the parapets making game developer gold. Now, they actually are feeling, I think, hungry for success because they don't get it by default, and they're feeling like they have to earn it. Whenever they're doing stuff that's not making the community happy, they care enough to make a live stream happen so they can talk about it. And even though they know they will be memed on, and they know not everyone will believe them, they're still willing to go out there and try to have that dialogue. That is something that I respect from this team. It's not something we've always got from Blizzard. As a World of Warcraft person, I have seen the WoW team transform from very bad at communication to now being quite good at communication, and they seem to have stuck with it. So, if anything, this is the bit that's the most important. Their ability to incorporate your feedback, act on it, not make the same mistakes again. And it does seem like that decision-making apparatus is better than it has been in the past. And with that said, I don't really have much else to say about this topic. Now you're filled in on what's going on. For me, I'm going to say Season 1, it ain't enough for me to put my time into it. However, Season 2, if it's shaking stuff up a little bit more, I think I would totally love to do a new character on a new class and try out some new builds. Maybe, I don't know, maybe I'll go do ranged or do a slow melee like a barbarian. Why not, right? Does that mean I'm going to play the game now? No. Does it mean that because of the quality of their communication, I am now open to trying it again in the future when I'm in a position where I didn't burn myself out in the game purposefully because when I stopped finding it fun, I exited the game properly? yeah, and I suppose that's a bit of a win-win for them. Okay, what's your experience been? Of course, there actually wasn't a video on the channel yesterday, but there's a really good one on the channel the day before that. And be sure to sub, because actually there might even be 2 videos on the channel today. How insane is that? Have a great day, and I'll see you later.